Got an abundance of intel from OU football practice to discuss on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on the KREF Sports app. And Josh, practice was open to the media for about 90 minutes, and there were a number of intriguing things that came out of that. First, let's start with the wide receiver group because it's a very, very deep group. From what we understand, maybe Nick Anderson didn't practice today, but the starting trio that was working with the ones, you had Jaleel Farouk, Deion Burks, and one Jaden Gibson. So what are your first initial thoughts when you hear about maybe those three kind of, at least as the lead guys, if Nick Anderson wasn't available?
Well, obviously, Jaden Gibson is going to continue to see his role increase, I think, going forward. Now, he's behind Nick Anderson. Nick Anderson would have that starting spot out of the wide receiver rotation if he was healthy and available. But I do think it's a positive indication for Jaden Gibson all the same. And he might not be a starting guy, but I think that he's going to continue to see his snap count continue to climb up. And then the others, well, obviously, I think Jaleel Farouk, though some after the bowl game left it frustrated about, Jaleel Farouk's future at Oklahoma. If you've listened to us, we've sat here and told you Jaleel Farouk is going to be a starting wide receiver for Oklahoma. He's going to be a big factor for Oklahoma in 2024. That's not changing because of one turnover-laden game in the Alamo Bowl versus Arizona. So I think we found that out. And then the other thing that we found out, which should not be altogether shocking either, is that Deion Burks is set to come in and be the big transfer portal wide receiver acquisition for OU. I think he's going to be a starter at slot, and I think he's going to be a big-time playmaker for OU next season.
Yeah, this group of three that we're talking about just goes to show how talented the group is, because if Jaden Gibson is your fourth wide receiver, you're looking really, really good. I know he didn't get a ton of run last year, but the run that he did get, he was very impressive. I mean, 5 touchdowns on 14 receptions. That's pretty impressive. Some of the highlight reel catches that he made, he showed off that big time athleticism and that size that made him a 4-star prospect that was highly coveted back in the 2022 signing class. So it's a dude that's continuing to ascend, and who knows what Nick Anderson's dealing with, but having Jaden Gibson as the potential, fourth wide receiver out of the gates, and maybe even a starter at some point in the 2024 season, that's huge. And it also provides a lot of hey, the future is really, really bright at the position beyond, when Jaleel Farouk goes off to the NFL and Andrel Anthony goes off to the NFL, and probably Deion Burks, if he has the season that everybody's expecting that he's going to have this season, you're potentially going to lose 3 big-time players, but you still have a really, really, really nice future in Nick Anderson, Jaden Gibson, and then what's coming up behind those two guys as well. Sticking on the offensive side of the ball at tight end, if you haven't seen the highlight, whether it's on Facebook or on Twitter, the OU football media group put out a highlight of Jackson Arnold throwing a pretty impressive ball to a tight end for a touchdown in practice. That was Bauer Sharp wearing number 10. And somebody pointed out to us over on Twitter at Locked On Sooners that he was getting some Blake Bell vibes with that tight end wearing number 10. Bauer Sharp, former quarterback. Could he potentially be a even more athletic Blake Bell? It sounds like he's making a lot of noise so far in spring ball.
That's great to hear, because obviously Oklahoma needs that tight end room to see some rapid improvement. Devon Mitchell is the signee that comes in, ballyhooed signee with all this type of potential about him. but you need somebody experienced that can go make plays too, or it just can't be you wouldn't think the tight end's a position where really you'd like to have 2 or 3 guys that you feel good about, just because, look, you got to be able to do more than just go catch the football. You got to be an inline blocker. Oklahoma will ask that. I would imagine with Seth Littrell and Joe John Finley calling the shots for this offense, that they're going to want their tight ends to get down and dirty and put a hand in the dirt every now and again and go be a blocker. So with that being said, again, you need multiple options. You're probably going to have some wear and tear at times there. And so for Bauer Sharp to be somebody that can potentially step up and go make some plays after the catch, and then obviously do more than that too, along with a rook like Devon Mitchell, with the Caden Helms, I think that's very important to go along with a name like Jake Roberts too. So I don't want to get too out over our skis over something that's happened in a 90-minute session of spring practice where the media attended, but I will categorize myself as cautiously optimistic that hopefully tight end across the board can be improved for Oklahoma.
Well, it can't be much worse than what it was in 2023. And so, but as we've discussed, it's got to be good. It's got to be an impactful part of the offense. You can't be playing 10 on 11 in the passing game with a tight end that's not going to be a threat. But it sounds like Oklahoma's got some threats. George Stoy of Sooner Scoop said this. He said the tight end room looks totally different in a good way. Bauer Sharp looks good. Definitely someone who will play. But Davin Mitchell looks special. Also, on the offensive side of the football, Jovantae Barnes revealed that he is healthy. And 2023 was a very frustrating calendar year for the former 4-star running back. Just never got over the foot ailment, tried to get back at different times in the 2023 season, but never could really get his explosion back, his burst back, and never really looked right. But early returns right now, he's looking healthy, was getting the second running back reps behind Gavin Sawchuk. How big is that for the Sooners to be getting Jovantae Barnes back, who, again, if you go back to that 2022 season, as a true freshman, was the second leading rusher, ran for over 500 yards, had a bunch of touchdowns behind Eric Gray.
Well, let's dive into it in full next. Let's expound on what we think it means with Jovantae Barnes. It's obviously, I mean, look, it's going to be good news. Spoiler alert. Ah, yes. You don't want that bracket totally busted. And well, I guess if the bracket is totally busted, you can always still go on over to FanDuel and say goodbye to your busted bracket, because guess what? FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the NCAA tourney, whether you're betting on that big upset or you're going chalk like yours truly. If you're going chalk, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, or you can even pick from this point forward who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Some early numbers for you in the Sweet 16 variety. Arizona, 6.5-point favorite over Clemson. Connecticut, go figure, big favorite in the national championship rematch versus San Diego State, 10.5 points there. North Carolina, I kind of like this number over Alabama, -4.5, close to a pick'em between Illinois and Iowa State. That's 1.5 right now from FanDuel, and you can go on and on and on. How about Kelvin and the boys? -4.5 versus Duke and Tennessee. Creighton looks like, according to the odds makers, it's going to be a great game. -2.5 Tennessee favored there. But again, FanDuel.com/lockedon, where you can get in on the NCAA tournament action.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your #1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Josh back with the team and back healthy is Jovantae Barnes, looking to maybe get a bit of a resurgent year after missing much of 2023. Again, how big is that for the Sooners to get back a guy who had over 500 yards rushing as a true freshman?
Well, I feel better now that we understand. I like this from Sooner Scoop and George Stoya, who's kind of breaking the story. Jovantae Barnes explains mysterious 2023 season, says he was never healthy, right? So, I mean, that's sort of what we had known and had heard with Jovantae Barnes, but now Jovantae Barnes has come out and said that he had to have the foot surgery and timing and resting it. It just never got all the way back last season for OU. So what do I think about it? Well, I want to see him be healthy first. So I'm sort of uncertain what to think about it. My initial response is it provides obvious depth for Oklahoma to go along with Gavin Sawchuk, who I think in the back half of last season, as we've discussed on many an occasion, proved that maybe he's morphing into OU's number one back. And of course, you got Taylor Tatum in the mix here, the mix there now. I really like Xavier Robinson in this group coming in as a young running back as well. I think he provides something different from the other backs, but I'm happy to hear that for Jovantae Barnes. I hope that he can show us some of the flashes that we saw in the true freshman season. But right now, I'm kind of like some of the other things we talked about a little bit ago. I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't want to get too carried away like with the tight ends. I need to see Jovantae Barnes show me that the surgery went well and that he's going to long-term stay healthy.
Absolutely. I think that's a fair place to be. It's important, though, because you don't have Taylor Tatum on campus yet. You don't get him until the summertime. And how quickly will he be able to get up to speed and ready to go for the fall? We'll see. It's rare, or at least it hasn't been a common occurrence for summer enrollees to have big impacts in their true freshman season for Brent Venables and his staff. Now, Taylor Tatum's different. I mean, he's a unique talent that could really change all of that. But like you mentioned, Xavier Robinson, I think, is going to be the guy that pushes for playing time, at least pushes Jovantae Barnes a little bit to get some of those early reps in practice. But I think if you get Jovantae Barnes back and he's healthy, I think it gives you a really, really nice 1-2 punch with Sawchuk and Barnes, and then whoever else emerges after that. There's been a lot of talk about offensive line as well. Well, one of the new transfer additions, Fabechu is blowing everybody's mind. Everybody is excited about him. And it sounds like in the open portion of practice, he really stood out. And I think that's a really good sign for Oklahoma, that if this guy that is coming in and an ascending player and someone people are projecting to be one of your starters along the offensive line, you want to see him make some plays and stand out. And it sounds like everything is trending in that direction for Weewu. Yeah,
that's great. And Oklahoma needs to hear about 3 or 4 more guys really standing out, and maybe even more than that. And, you look at just some of the folks that were out there watching this live. George Stoya, again, I'll turn back. He has a really nice thread out there on X, formerly known as Twitter, all of kind of his thoughts. Obviously, for all of our folks, right? Subscribe to OU Insider, Sooner Scoop, and our friends Sooners Illustrated. I say support everybody to get all of their behind the scenes work. But from what he put out on X, formerly known as Twitter, Heath Ozida, I guess, is somebody that really impressed him. Isosa was working a little bit at center, and Eugene Brooks and Daniel Akinkumi are working at guard. So some interesting offensive line developments happening, which, look, for where OU's at, where you're replacing all 5 starters. And if you want to say, okay, we're only replacing 4 because Sexton's back, that's fine. I'll accept that. He does have some starting experience, but you're replacing a lot up front. So there's a lot to sort out. This spring season, I think most everybody would agree. Jackson Arnold, sure. Maybe pick a position like corner or somewhere defensively. I'd entertain some arguments, but most would agree offensive line this spring season, it's most important that they find some answers and find some serious development right now in the spring along the offensive line.
And back to Ozida, that kind of carries over from what we were hearing during bowl season, was that he was one of the guys that was really, really intriguing and was standing out during bowl practices as well. Although maybe he didn't have much of an impact in the game, he was making a lot of noise during that stretch, getting some more opportunities, some more reps. So that just kind of carries over into the spring season, which that's good news. That's the stuff you want to hear, right? Guys continuing to build upon what they've already done. And if he can maybe go in and lock down a tackle spot or maybe one of those guard spots, that'd be really good for the Sooners. He's an athletic dude that moves really, really well. And it's just about getting on campus and building out his frame a little bit more, because he's a tall dude. He's like 6'6", 6'7". So he needs to kind of widen out a little bit to be able to help with that base and just get stronger. So that's an encouraging sign. Defensive tackle, that's going to be one of those other position groups that everybody is going to be watching, because one, you're a little bit thin with experience. You got Dejon Terry back, but you lost Jacob Lacey to medical retirement. You do have Davin Sears, who played some at Texas State, but didn't really play for you much in 2023. And then you're looking at Grayson Halton and Ashton Sanders and Marcus Strong. And then the youngsters, David Stone and Jaden Jackson. Well, according to Jesse Crittenden over there at OU Insider, those young defensive tackles were standing out, Grayson Halton and Marcus Strong. So that's an encouraging sign as well. I think everybody's going to have their eyes on David Stone, and from all intents and purposes, it sounds like he's looking the part early on in his career at Oklahoma.
As he should, right? I mean, 5-star kid that was at IMG Academy. He's not going to be as overwhelmed by the jump from high school to college football, you wouldn't think, as an early enrollee, just because of where he played coming out of high school. So, but look, you can't expect that David Stone's just going to come in and start 75% of the snaps for you in year one, right? So these in-house guys, and even if David Stone's somebody and Jaden Jackson, if both of those guys play legitimate roles as true freshmen, that would be great. And it means that maybe there's a chance that they're superstars going forward, which that's, at least for David Stone, the expectation, right? Is that he's that big time first round, second round NFL draft pick defensive tackle. But Oklahoma needs some in-house development there. They need these other guys that they've recruited before that. One or two of those guys, the names that you mentioned, a Grayson Halton, a Marcus Strong, they need a couple of those names to wind up being hits as well.
And let me correct myself. It was George Stoya's note on the defensive tackle group, not Jesse Crittenden's. I'm getting all the wires crossed as I'm kind of reading all this insider intel, but appreciate all the work that everybody's doing. The last thing, Dasan McCullough, not participating at Cheetah, playing linebacker. That's kind of something we'd heard earlier on in the spring. It's supporting that discussion. Could he potentially be in the mix to start alongside Danny Stutzman? He's still a very, very young player. He's only in his third year at the collegiate level. So a lot of development still to happen with Dasan McCullough.
Well, and, look, you tried it. You tried it at Cheetah, and I don't know that you totally closed the book, and the spring might just be a time to find out what linebacker looks like for him too. I mean, there is a little bit of experimentation in the spring, though probably to some degree as well, you're trying to lay down plans that you feel like you're going to stick with. So there's kind of that little tightrope or balance there to where you do have the opportunity to experiment a little bit, John, with positions and, folks trying out different position groupings. And yet, look, if you can get that one leg up on making a position switch from Cheetah to linebacker, that's great too, to where you don't have to tinker and keep going back and forth. But Woodi Washington, if we're led to believe that he's going to start working out a little bit more at Cheetah, you think about some of the other names, Dolby and others that can help Oklahoma at Cheetah, that maybe this is just, let's find out if Dasan McCullough, who was very good his first season as more of an edge type player, maybe this is a little bit more natural for him at linebacker, and then you can line him up on the edge a little bit more frequently as well, and you can sort of use his best traits more frequently.
it's really interesting because you've got so many different pieces to work with, and you've got some really, really young linebacking talent that you want to continue to see develop. Samuel Omasigo, Lewis Carter, Phil Picciotti, to go along with Jaron Canick and Kip Lewis and Kobe McKenzie. So, man, it's going to be fun to see how Brent Venables and Zach Alley bring this group together and figure out how they're going to best deploy that group, because we know that they're going to want to run 4-man, 3-man fronts, which means you're going to run some 2-man linebacker situations and some 3 linebacker situations. I could foresee a situation where Dasan McCullough is one of your 3 linebackers and playing more on that outside linebacker role and then rushing the passer. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that all gets deployed. The Oklahoma Sooners women's basketball team, the season came to an end against Indiana. We're going to discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. The NC State Wolfpacker, obviously this week's Nissan Rogue, the team absolutely surprised us with all with a powerhouse performance in their first 2 games of the tournament. Wins over Texas Tech and Oakland have set them up to play Marquette in the Sweet 16. They say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Wolfpack have done here. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. So the Oklahoma Sooners women's basketball season comes to an end at the hands of the Indiana Hoosiers in Indiana, in Bloomington, in the second round, the round of 32. It was a close game for a lot of this one, and it was back and forth. It was tight. Oklahoma at one point had a 7-8 point lead in the third quarter. Late in the game, they had a 4-point lead and just couldn't do enough to hang on in this game. They did not shoot very well, and it was a rough game to have a poor shooting night, both from the field and from 3, where they just shot 16%. And, it was a rough go of it for Peyton Verhulst, for Nevaeh Tot. Even though Skylar Vann had 20 points, she did not have an efficient shooting night, 8 for 23. And then a lot of the story comes down to Oklahoma not getting the benefit of the doubt from the officials there in Bloomington, as they were out free throwed by the Indiana Hoosiers by 16 attempts in this game, and which ended up being a 7-point loss for the Sooners.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about the free throw discrepancy other than, that's unfortunate. I guess try and attack the basket a little bit more, but because you look at it and you see Oklahoma hoisted 25 threes compared to Indiana's 16. So there might be a little bit something to, if you tried to attack a little bit more, maybe that could have helped. But obviously there was a legitimate free throw discrepancy. Oklahoma fought hard, man, against a really good Indiana team. Mackenzie Holmes, I think, is one of the best players in women's college basketball. Probably doesn't get the same shine as, say, a Caitlin Clark, obviously, or insert any sort of stars from South Carolina or Angel Reese. I love Mackenzie Holmes' game. She's a big-time player. Skylar Vann, though, you think about the season coming to a close and capping it here. Skylar Vann had a sensational season for Oklahoma. I think the positives, some of the other positives you take is Sahara Williams going forward. That's a big-time positive for OU. So I like the direction of where this is headed. I've said many times over before that Ginny Baranchek's somebody you want to play for, because she's a player's coach, and also the system that they employ, John, is just a fun brand of basketball, getting up and down and taking shots. And you saw in this game tonight that they weren't afraid to try and go turn it into a grinder either. We can sit there and talk about Oklahoma, and they didn't shoot it well. They shot 16%. They held Indiana to 18.8% from 3-point range and 38.5% from the floor. So Oklahoma tried to defend its tail off in this game, and unfortunately, they just didn't have quite enough late.
Yeah, some of it was mental miscues late in the game where they just got a little bit loose with the basketball, but sometimes it's just the way basketball go. It's the way the ball bounces. And, it was a really good season for them. Unfortunate not to be able to get to the Sweet 16 yet again for the third straight year under Jenny Baranczyk. But I mean, again, it was a bit of a tough draw, having to go to Bloomington and then face the host team in Indiana, which was a great crowd. I mean, that was a fantastic crowd that the Hoosier fans and faithful put forth. Represented basketball well, represented that school well, but unfortunate for Oklahoma that they weren't able to get through and then get to the benefit of going to face the South Carolina team. Who knows how that would have gone? Probably not great, but you still would have liked to see how they stacked up against the best team in college basketball, or arguably the best team in college basketball. But for Jenny Baranczyk, 3 straight tournaments, 3 straight round of 32s, 2 straight Big 12, regular season titles. I mean, she's established herself as one of the promising young coaches in college basketball, one of the best in the nation, in my opinion. And it's only going to be a matter of time until Joe Castiglione, Joseph Harraz come down with that extension to keep her in Norman for the foreseeable future, especially as you go into the SEC and you're going to be going up against some powerhouse programs like South Carolina, like LSU, Tennessee. You are going to want to make sure you have your head coaching position solidified. And Jenny Baranczyk is the answer at that spot. Again, the ball just didn't bounce their way, didn't get the benefit of some calls in this game. Otherwise, they're on their way to the Sweet 16.
They're an established, very good program now with Coach Jenny Baranczyk and this staff and this group of players. And really now the goal becomes, how do we establish ourselves as, again, one of the great women's college basketball programs? Because they're not there yet, but they're very, very good. They're in that group right below that, right? So they just need to figure out, how do we get those last couple of pieces in place, and what do we need collectively to become that great team that gets into the second weekend routinely in the NCAA tournament. But I forecast great things for this program. I think Jenny Baranczyk, as you mentioned, John, is a rock star in the making in women's college basketball in terms of the coaching profession. So I love this staff. I love the direction of the program. If I'm a fan, I'm not feeling too bad that they went and fought their tails off in Bloomington against, again, an Indiana team that going into the season was considered a top 10 type Indiana team. So there's really no reason to have any shame in the way that this thing ended.
No, and I think maybe this is a discussion for another day, but just to note one final thing on this, I don't think we talked enough about having to replace, Taylor Robertson and Maddie Williams and Anna Yanusa and Liz Scott, for their top 5 scorers from a year ago. And yeah, non-conference didn't go great, but they figured it out and they were able to turn it around in Big 12 play and again, go win that Big 12 regular season title. Just it's a testament to the coaching job that Jenny Baranczyk and her staff have accomplished in 2023, 2024, which should give you more optimism about the future, because they're going to continue to build this thing in a positive direction. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Also, go check out the Locked On Sports Today. It's streaming live 24/7 on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef, myself at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners. But until next time, he's Josh, I'm John. Boomer Sooner.